LA Rams slight favorites to win the NFC West after trading for Matthew Stafford. Rams wide receiver Robert Woods was on the Dan Patrick show recently and was asked about Stafford coming in, and Woods said, hey, he's got a lot to prove. He's never won a playoff game. 0-3 all time. Jared Goff won playoff games. LA gave up a lot to get Matthew Stafford. They just never won a first-round pick again, like ever. Their last first-round pick was Jared Goff in 2016, who they traded to the Lions, along with first-round picks next year and the year after, and a third-round pick. They're scheduled to go 8 years between first-round picks. But hey, if Matthew Stafford can lead them to the Super Bowl and win it all, it'll all be worth it. Let's go into the Rams war room. I'm Chris Hassel, joined by Brady Quinn. We also have Pete Prisco with us. Brady, what kind of a difference do you think Matthew Stafford is going to make over Jared Goff?
Well, I think he's going to bring a little higher level of consistency than what we saw from Jared Goff, at least last year. I think when you go back to his final season in LA, that was the tough part, was at that point in time in his career, he'd obviously done some really good things, but when they needed him to step up the most and play consistent football, he just didn't. And I think throughout the course of Matt Stafford's career, he's been one of the more prolific passers in this league. So I think they're hoping for better decision making, especially versus pressure, and then just a higher level of play and consistency at that higher level. They don't have Todd Gurley to rely on anymore, and I think that was one of the things too when you go back and look at Jared Goff's career. A couple of years that he was there, Todd Gurley was a legitimate MVP candidate. And so people felt like they were maybe relying too much on him, or Jared Goff was relying too much on him to kind of carry the load for this team. Well, now that burden kind of goes to Matt Stafford, and he's got a heck of a running back in Cam Akers. But this is a great fit for him. I think he's going to explode and have a phenomenal year this year within Sean McVay's system, especially with some of the talented pieces they have out around him.
I love Matt Stafford. I think he's been one of the most underrated players in the league for a long time. Never really got to do he deserved because he played with bad teams in Detroit because he didn't win a playoff game. Having said all that, he's got to really get to a certain level to duplicate what Jared Goff did with the Rams. The Rams were within a whisker of winning it all a couple years ago. Let's not forget that. So anything less than getting to a Super Bowl in the next couple years with Matt Stafford means this trade is a disaster, means it didn't work. And they don't have first-round picks, which puts a lot of pressure on Les Snead and gang to find players in the later rounds. Now, they've done a good job of that. They've done a really good job of that. But they have to keep that going, or else ultimately this thing's going to fall apart around Matt Stafford.
Yeah, likely going at least 7 drafts without a first-round pick. Is that something that can work?
It's an interesting strategy, and I'm curious to hear what Pete's going to say about it, because I think what you're looking at when you're taking a first-round pick is a guy that's going to come in and be a starter right away. Now, you're hoping he's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler, Hall of Fame, all that good stuff. But that's what you're basically saying, is you feel like this guy is closer than the subsequent rounds of being a starter, a day in and a day out starter. So why not trade away that first-round pick for a known, proven commodity, whether it be Jalen Ramsey or a guy like Matt Stafford? And especially if you don't feel like the hit rate is that great on first-round picks. So why not then trade it away and get you a proven commodity, and then use those middle to late rounds to find guys that still can make your roster and contribute? It makes a lot of sense, I think. And look, when they traded everything kind of in and they built this roster up during Jared Goff's rookie contract, they did get to a Super Bowl. Now, they didn't seal the deal, but I think that's part of the thought process here, is with as good as their defense played last year, combined with what they feel like Matt Stafford can bring, I feel like they feel like they've got a shot at making a run to the Super Bowl.
The only problem with that scenario, Brady, and I tend to agree with you, stars win. You got to have 4 or 5, 3, 4, 5 of them, and I get that. The only problem with that is they're taking up over, what, $75, $76 million worth of their cap room this year in a couple of players, in Jalen Ramsey, Aaron Donald, and Matt Stafford. That's not a good thing. And so there's your problem. You have to be able to draft guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round that are going to be contributors, not just guys who make the roster. They have to be contributors on a consistent basis to kind of keep your cap in check. So I do like getting stars. I just think there's a big risk there because you're paying them so much money as well.
Short-term risk, Pete, in a year like this year because of the salary cap implications, the way it's come down. But now with that new TV deal, I think we would all agree that's going to skyrocket. You know, their percentage of the cap moving forward isn't going to be quite as big as I think what we're looking at it is for this year. So I understand what you're saying, and that's obviously always a concern. But when you've got Pro Bowl caliber talent talented players in your roster at those key positions, quarterback, cornerback, a guy who's an interior best defensive player in the league, edge rusher, those sorts of positions. Those are the guys you got to hang your hat on, and they should be the highest paid players on your roster.
How do you think they did in free agency this season?
I mean, it was all about Matt Stafford. I mean, that's what this was about. So nothing else matters this offseason in regards to free agency or your acquisitions via a trade if Matt Stafford doesn't work out. And now really comes down to, as Pete kind of touched on, because of the way they set this up, trading away so many first-round picks, how they do in those middle to late rounds with those draft picks, and can those guys be plug-in-play players and be contributors this year?
Yeah, well, they did lose John Johnson, who's a good safety. They also lost Troy Hill, another corner. So they suffered some hits in free agency, but you're going to do that when you bring a guy like Matt Stafford in because of the contract. So now it's imperative that they draft well. And look, I've known Les Snead for a long time. He's done a really good job of drafting, but this puts more pressure on him and his group to go out and find those guys in the second, third, fourth, and fifth rounds because they're going to have to be contributors early in their careers.
And they don't have a first-round pick, obviously. What is their biggest need going into the draft with their first pick not coming until the second round?
To me, it's cornerback. I think when you look at this roster right now, you can make a case on a number of different positions, but you need someone opposite of Jalen Ramsey that can also shut down opposing wide receivers. I think when you look at the roster, that to me is the weakest spot. Or if I'm playing, then I'm saying, look, I'm not looking Jalen Ramsey's way anyway. So whoever's on that other side, I'm going to make him the player of the game one way or another. He's either going to have the worst game of his career or the best game of his career. So cornerback in the second round, and it's either if Tyson Campbell's there, if Asante Samuel Jr. slips, which I don't think he will, or Melvin Fonwu out of Syracuse. Those are just kind of three names of guys that I would be, really targeting hard to try to draft in the second round to help me stop what I think would be maybe a sieve within your defense opposite of Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, I thought Darius Williams played well last year, though, Brady. I think he really had a great year. Now, can he do it again? That's the big question, which is why I didn't make corner their #1 priority. I could understand getting another one after losing Hill, though. Here's the situation. I think they need pass rush help, and by that I mean edge rush help. Yeah, they brought Leonard Floyd back, but they don't have much else. And, Terrell Lewis flashed at times last year, but they could also use more there as well. I think, a run and chase linebacker would be a nice addition as well. They got Reeder and Micah Kaiser, but are those guys good enough? And then the offensive line. You look at that line. Andrew Whitworth is getting way up in the years. They lost their center in free agency. Now they got to hope that Brian Allen is a potential starter again at center. So I think offensive line is another position that they could definitely address a couple times in this draft.
I don't disagree with that. I think the one thing, though, is, Pete, when you look at this draft class for edge rushers, we talked about this, is, you don't have that quite top-end guy, but I also don't know that you're getting the impactful guy that, like, Pete's looking for that they might need to at that spot in the second round. I think those guys are probably going to be gone by the time. I believe they picked number 57 overall, if I'm not mistaken. And so that spot's most likely going to be gone. I think you can still get a quality starter that's going to be a lockdown corner in the second round, as deep as this group of cornerbacks are.
They have a second-round pick and a couple of third-round picks. One of them is a compensatory pick. Pete, Brady mentioned Melifonwu. He's on your list as well for somebody they should target.
Yeah, again, a long corner, a guy that could come in there and help them. And cornerback is a position of need. There's no doubt about that. They need help there, and he would be a guy that would be in that area. But I think edge, Patrick, down the line, guys. Joseph Osai from Texas will be a second or third rounder. Patrick Johnson down the line, maybe fourth or fifth. But the two centers are interesting. If you're looking at their offensive line, you have a new quarterback. You would like to have a better center than Brian Allen in front of him. I think Creed Humphrey is a possibility if he were to last to that spot. And Josh Myers is a name. When you ask around the league and talk to the scouts to say who's the second best center, Josh Myers' name comes up a lot. So I think he would be a good pick in the second round as well.
I'm with you. We've got very similar, picks, just different players. Talked about the cornerback position. I added Shaun Wade to that list. Maybe he's a guy you look at in the second round. Pete, I'm not sure how you feel about how he finished out. Didn't have a great season last year. But a couple other positions outside of edge where I've got, maybe some other talent or prospects coming out to join Aaron Donald, Patrick Jones, Rashad Weaver, both those guys potentially in those middle rounds. But, look at the inside linebacker spot. Cameron McGrone out of Michigan, Tony Fields out of West Virginia. Both those guys, I think, would be contributors on special teams if you could get them mid-late rounds, but also guys who could potentially work into becoming a starter. We saw that from the Rams with a guy like Corey Littleton, who's no longer there. And then the other position that Pete touched on that they lost in free agency was John Johnson. Caden Stearns is a player that was really highly ranked coming out of high school to Texas. I don't know that he ever really lived up to the billing, but also they had a ton of defensive struggles that were going on throughout his time there. But he's still got a ton of talent, ton of ability. It was one of those bright spots on Texas defense outside of Joseph Ossai, who we mentioned. I wouldn't mind seeing them find a way of getting Caden Stearns on this roster. I think he could really excel within that scheme.
If you had to pick a team to win the West, would it be the Rams? They're slight favorites.
Man, it's a no for me, and in part because it's always tough to pick against Russell Wilson and Seattle Seahawks. I still view that team as the one that I have the most confidence and faith in because he's their quarterback. And then after that, I think it's the Rams. I'm just curious to see if that defense will be able to replicate what they did last year, especially losing their DC to become a head coach.
Pete, Rams win the division, yes or no?
No, I don't think they do. And I'm not sure who will, but I don't think they do. We keep talking about how Jared Goff, now they got Matt Stafford. But the image you have, the lasting image, is the Green Bay Packers running right through them all game long. They just abused them up front. And have they got much better up front? Probably not. So the answer to that question is no. I don't think they will win the division.
Asked for a one-word answer, and I got about 300 words from Pete. That's rare. Pete, usually you go the other way. Ask for a long answer, and you tighten it down. That's Pete Prisco, Brady Quinn. This is the Rams war room heading into a season where they are slight favorites to win the NFC West, but nobody is even money in that division because it is expected to once again be one of, if not the best division in football. Minus 200 to make the postseason, plus 650 to win the league.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.